So today we have a packed agenda. I'm going to get started. And just very quickly, so we are, this is October 3rd, and we have two more meetings after this to sort of work through our policy recommendations. And next meeting, we'll talk about the report and the format and our presentation role. So hopefully today we'll make a lot of headway in going through the 5 policy recommendations, which is toward the end. But before that, we do have several updates. So Juan, I just wanted to thank you again for sending out the survey. I know you had that out for 2 weeks. And would you like to let us know how many people responded? How many, if you do have this information, how many persons were reached through the survey? And a summary of the findings that you have.
Sure. Let me just say that, and it looks, we sent out the survey to at least 42 individuals, and we received a total of 24 responses. And I would say out of those 24 responses, we had about 20 organizations, because some organizations had multiple staff members respond, and that was good. So it looks like maybe roughly about a 50% response. Now, I do have to mention that I also asked for help from some of the other organizations, like from the county executives, AAPI advisory group. Yishen, he sent out a blast to all of his networks, and also I reached out to Christina Poi at the state level. She's the staff director for the Governor's Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs, as well as South Asian Affairs Commissions. But anyway, getting to some of the results, I didn't have a lot of time to look into the responses and analyze them deeply, but a quick glance. A few things that I noticed that I think would be noteworthy. First of all, of course, about 79% of the organizations had offices in Montgomery County, and 96% of them had members or clients that were residing in Montgomery County. So one of the things I noticed was that 25% had no capacity to do any training on personal safety, self-defense, or bystander training, about a quarter. And then 20% did have capacity, but they were not planning to do any of it. 20%, another 20% had the capacity and they are planning to do some training. And then of course, 25% had already done training on personal safety, or self-defense, or bystander training. They didn't specify which. And of course, there was 10% who didn't know or unsure whether their organizations did any of it. Another question that was interesting was 50% of the respondents said that addressing hate against other communities was a high priority. And 25% said that addressing hate against other communities was a medium priority. And of course, the remaining 25% had it as a low priority or not a priority at all. In terms of members or clients, they did indicate that about 33% of their members or clients spoke English, whether were partially fluent in English or not fluent at all, so about a third. And then of course the other 2/3, they were either fluent in English or they were native speakers. Another thing to note is there was a question on, which sources of media do their community members get their information from, or get their information, news, general news from. And I would say almost, I think 100% get it from social media platforms. And also, because this was a multiple answer question, but also about 100% get it from in-person word of mouth news. I thought that was interesting. And then another maybe 75% of their members get it from email newsletters or subscriptions from. And then in terms of which source of media do their members get their information about government or nonprofit services, again, it was very similar, social media, word of mouth, online news websites. So I thought that was important to note. And then there was a question about, whether their community members what was their community members' experience with hate resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. And it looks like there were, a lot of them responded that their community members had much more experience as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. I would say, in general, probably at least anywhere between, for those who experienced much more based on a lot of things, it was anywhere between, I would say 30 to 60%. So that there was definitely an increase as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then there was a question about, whether community members experience hate, and about 2/3 mentioned that they experience possible hate incidents, but no clear evidence or no proof. 2/3 of it, 2/3 of their members. So that's important to note. And then I would about maybe 58% said that they their members experience actual hate incidents with clear evidence. So that's a huge number, 58%. And then there were, just some comments, but I did want to point out there was a comment from I believe it's about the Sikh community, because they are more targeted because they wear the turban, so it's very visible. And I think there was a related comment from the same organization that not having a member of the Sikh community to be part of this AAPI cohort or the task force was unfortunate, because they are targeted quite often based on the visibility. So I thought that was important to mention. And I did mention previously that we had a response from individual from the Jain community, which is another South Asian religious organization as well. And one thing I wanted to note was we did not get a response from the Korean American organization, community organization. So I felt that that was lacking, although a number of organizations that responded said that they did have that their members and clients are, from the Korean American community.
Thank you,
And,
Juan. Did you reach the end of your findings?
yeah, I think I did want to kind of read. There were some comments, and again with the Sikh community, the comment was, the Sikh community has not been included in the cohort presentations being held over the next few weeks. It would be important to include this community, which has a visible identity that is largely unknown and misidentified by the majority of Montgomery County residents. When groups are not included in such county-wide programs and discussions, it is a cause for concern, a loss in participating to help make informed decisions about the community in question, as well as not being able to provide safety measures based on the basis of the community's needs. And I will end it there. There's a lot of information that we collected. It's just very hard to kind of summarize it in a short period of time. But,
and you did. Thank you, Juan. That was very comprehensive. Acknowledge the concern by that member from the Sikh American community. And while we as appointed task force members did not make the appointments, I think we did the next best thing, which was to reach out. We had a number of participating Sikh American organizations. And Nazneen, if you also had any other ideas to ensure a higher level of inclusivity, we're all ears, since you're in charge of the cohort. So let me actually also now turn.
I do want to make one last comment, and I did want to thank you, all of the cohort members, for really helping to reach out to all these organizations to get them to respond. So I thank you for doing that this past week.
Yes, thank you all very much. Couldn't have done it without you. So I have a guest speaker here, and then we're going to have Meredith jump on in about 5 minutes. So if I could hold Nazneen and Jeff on any report out that you have on any meetings, and if we can just skip over to Esme McGuire. She's a senior legislative analyst with the county council. Is that right, Essie? And one of the portfolios is the schools. So last we spoke, it was about the jurisdictional differences of the county council and MCPS. And I think we came into understanding that there's a dedicated council committee on schools. So we want to invite Essie to talk about that and see if that committee in their regular course of business might be exercising oversight over MCPS and the new structure and processes and policies they have to address bullying and bias. So Essie, welcome and thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I will be brief. I know, as you said, you do have a full agenda, but I'm happy to also take questions if I'm too brief. Again, I'm Essie McGuire. I'm a senior legislative analyst at the council, and so I do support the committee, the Education and Culture Committee, which is the council's committee that has primary oversight over Montgomery County Public Schools, as well as the college and other educational organizations. With regards to Montgomery County Public Schools, there certainly is a unique jurisdictional and governmental structure, because in addition to the county council, of course, there is an elected board of education. And so the school system does come under the jurisdiction of two elected bodies. And so it does create some distinctions in terms of the oversight. Anything that's related directly to the operations of the school system. The operations, or what the law calls educational policy, is really the primary jurisdiction of the board. And so, I'm understanding that the question is related to following policies related to bullying or other incidents. The direct administration of those and the creation of those policies is under the jurisdiction of the board. The council primarily has financial and fiscal oversight. However, the Education and Culture Committee does also, and the council as a whole, have the oversight responsibilities and authority also to discuss a wide range of issues with the school system. And so, for example, while it's the board's responsibility to develop and approve the policies and regulations around bullying or other disciplinary investigative processes, the council certainly could and does have oversight discussions to ask about those policies, ask about the outcomes of a given data set. If, for example, there was a report of some kind, that report could be shared with the committee, and the committee could have a discussion about it with the school system. So hopefully that describes a little bit some of the jurisdictional changes or responsibilities rather. While the Education Committee primarily has budget discussions in the spring and other times that there are financial issues, the committee regularly has, again, as you're describing, sort of these oversight or discussive updates and reports on a wide variety of issues, ranging from the police presence in schools with community engagement officers, to mental health services for students, to we recently had a hearing regarding the investigative reports and policies that, of course, are so prevalent in the news. So again, that's sort of the back and forth of jurisdiction that we have with the board. I'll pause there, and I'm happy to answer any questions if that wasn't helpful enough.
Have you already had a hearing? And so I saw that there was recently an anti-racist audit and action plan. Has there already been review hearings on this?
There hasn't, but it is on our agenda for the fall. So that is a really good example. We did receive the committee received a couple of different updates about that process along the way, as the school system was, for example, before them related to budget and asking for funds about the anti-racist audit. We got an update on the process of that and have followed along sort of the reports as they've come out. But the specific implementation plan is on the committee's agenda for later this fall, and we'll have a broader report and discussion of it at that time. But that's a great example where it's obviously primarily the jurisdiction of the board, but yes, the committee will receive that report and discuss it.
Thank you, May. I think we have time for one last question, if anyone has one for Essie. Okay. Essie, thank you so much. That was very informative and very tight and cleared exactly what we needed. So appreciate your time.
Great.
And yes, go ahead.
No, thank you. I'm happy to be here. And if any follow-up questions or anything like that comes as you discuss further, I'm happy to follow up as needed.
And I have her email too, so anyone can get that from me.
Thank you
so much. Have a wonderful evening.
You too.
So at this time, we're going to welcome Meredith. Meredith, your last name, I actually never pronounced it. Is it Wiesel?
Weisel.
Weisel. Okay.
It's okay.
Weisel.
I'm used to it.
That's okay. With the ADL DC office, regional office, and Meredith directs that office. We're fortunate to have her here. As you know, she's a fellow cohort member. Task force member. And the reason why I invited her is because we did discuss in our last meeting opportunities for community members to be engaged in the schools. And I know ADL has a long history with working in the schools. Among them is is it the No Place for Hate program, Meredith? And so we're just curious to know sort of how many schools is partaking in that program, how it's coming along, and what volunteer opportunities may there be for community members to be involved?
Sure. So thank you. I really appreciate you guys having me on to talk about this. So quick little background. So No Place for Hate has been around for quite some time. We in Montgomery County right now, currently, so we are still in the process of doing registrations for the 2023-2024 school year. As of today, this morning, I double checked with my staff. There are 25 schools in Montgomery County. We will probably, I think we usually have somewhere close to like 30 to 40 each year, but it just kind of varies. It is pre-K through 12th grade. And the beauty of No Place for Hate is that it's student led. And I can put I can send you all, but I can put some things in the chat too. So I have my other screen over here. So No Place for Hate, basically it's a self-directed program for the students. Now, obviously kindergarten, there's a little bit more hand-holding, for in elementary school with the teachers and the faculty, but it is a way for students, educators, and family members also to participate in combating bias and bullying that we're seeing in the school system. So it's essentially an anti-bias program. And it is self-directed for all members of the school community. And I'm going to put this in the chat for everybody, just so you can kind of see what I'm going. Oh, the chat's disabled. I can't put it in the chat.
I think we can fix that, and we can also probably allow you to share screen if that's helpful.
Oh, that might be actually, yeah, if that works. Can I do that? I can share
Yeah,
screen.
should be able to do both now.
Okay, so I'm going to put this in the chat. So that is so everybody can kind of see along, and I will share my screen. There we go. Can everybody see that? So this is the No Place for Hate, what I just sent to you. And so you can see, so it's a student-led school climate improvement program. It is very specific to combating bias within the school system. And it's a way for, as it says, for student leadership, for the community to engage staff as well. Essentially what they do is, I'm just going to kind of run through it. So as I said, the students really lead it, although I will say in the elementary schools, it really depends on the age. They puts the students in the driver's seat. The students form a committee, and there are ways for them to do different programs throughout the year. And what you do is you take a pledge saying we're going to be a No Place for Hate school. And I will say the schools who have been part of No Place for Hate have been better at responding to hate and bias incidents when they have happened in the community, because they have the tools and the resources. There are a lot of schools that have become No Place for Hate after also an incident has happened, but we really want to create a climate where they're being more proactive about it. And so it's a whole of community, as I said, program. They do implement different activities. There are school-wide discussions. There are what we call table talks they can have at home with their families. There are different learning activities. It's a way for them to reflect on biased behavior that may be happening, for people to learn about different identities. So the same way like we've been doing with the Anti-Hate Task Force, to learn about all the different types of identities that are out there. And then there's this whole website has all the different resources. So there's professional learning, specifically for the educators and administrators within there, professional learning opportunities, online courses. There's also an entire curriculum about books matter. So different, you can see it says more than 800 plus books for children's to learn all about bias, bullying, diversity, social justice. A lot of it is about current events too, as they're happening. So particularly, like I would say at the high school level, one of the examples I'll give is during COVID, when there was a lot of bias that we were seeing against the AAPI community. In particular, there were resources we provided on how teachers, how family could talk about this and to have a better understanding of the conspiracy theories that we were seeing around COVID. Also, when George Floyd was murdered, there were resources and tools and table talks for parents, how to talk to your child, because we all know a lot of the videos went around social media. And then there's also K through 12 lesson plans that they can use about looking at through the lens of diversity, bias, and social justice. And this is essentially the website. And if there was an incident that happened and that's why they wanted to join, they can also click on here for the incident. So you can kind of browse this, at your leisure to kind of have a better understanding. But what we have found is on a national basis, this has really been a precursor for schools to start confronting some of the issues. And we know in schools, bullying, a huge portion of it does come from a form of bias against different communities, and schools don't always recognize that. They recognize it as a bullying incident. They don't always recognize that it comes from a form of hate and bias. And that's why we really want them to start confronting this. And I will tell you, it has been, as somebody who has, worked in this space from an anti-hate lens, we have definitely seen, as I said, schools respond better to the ones who have been part of No Place for Hate. And I will just use as an example, Whitman. So we did a training for the entire Whitman cluster earlier this year, right, or in August before school started. They started with No Place for Hate about 5 or 6 years ago because of issues of anti-Black racism, even before they were facing issues of anti-Semitism. So they have really kind of, set the tone of how, working with faculty and teachers. And we have seen it again in elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. And it really has just been incredibly beneficial for the community. So I'm happy to answer any questions. That's kind of the general overview, which is, I think, what you were looking for. And you can take a look, as I said, about the website and really the benefit of the work that it's been able to do.
Do we have any questions for Meredith? Yes, Juan.
Yeah, hi, Meredith.
Hi.
So my question is, I mean, first of all, it sounds like a fantastic program, something that is much needed. My question is, how does a school become a no place for hate school?
Yeah, so 2 things. So 1, they basically contact us. And sometimes it's word of mouth. So they contact ADL. My staff then works with them to fill out the forms. There's a place on the website where they can send in an inquiry. Sometimes the principal, it was an incident, the principal then touches base with us. And really, it's filling out paperwork. I should also note it is free. There is no cost necessarily for them. There are some costs, as far as like, we provide them with X number of there's like wristbands and stickers, and they get a banner at the end, and they get a certification at the end of the school year. But this is really for the schools, just outreach directly to us. That's really it. Yeah, it's that simple.
So a follow-up question is, what are the challenges that you're seeing to get this into the schools?
So the challenges is more it's an extra layer for educators. They are trying to do the day-to-day work that they have to do in the classroom. And so that's why we try to incorporate things that they can be doing already, like in English classes. There are books that they can encourage them to read. There's curriculum that we can recommend so that it's incorporated in. A lot of the schools will form a committee, with particularly at the high school and the middle school level. And so it is, an extra layer for staff. I mean, that's probably the biggest barrier, and just because of everything that they already have to do. So that's why you probably won't see every school in the district do it. So that I think that's probably the hardest part of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
May?
So you mentioned something earlier where a lot of the bias is probably looked at from a bullying lens versus like an anti-hate lens. How can we change that? I mean, I noticed that also in their anti-racism audit. There was language around bullying and harassment and discrimination, but it doesn't specifically talk about hate. And so that was where I thought language could be strengthened, but I was just wondering if you had additional recommendations.
Yeah, so I think the gut reaction, and I've talked to a lot of my friends who are educators in MCPS, when an incident happens, a kid is harassed, a kid is pushed, they automatically just say this was bullying. They don't look at what the intent necessarily was. It's just they're not used to viewing it through that lens. That's where something like No Place for Hate helps them to have a better understanding of looking at it not just as a bullying incident. It may just be a bullying incident, but there may be something more that it is coming from. So a lot of it is just education. And when we do trainings for faculty, I say faculty because it's not just teachers who are in the classroom. There are teachers who, or there are faculty who are in the hallways who may not be, a teacher in the classroom. We have to up our training with them to understand and recognize how to recognize bias. It's not ingrained. It's just not something they have always done. So I think it's just more education, and something like No Place for Hate. It's a way for the faculty, so the teachers, the administrators, and the students to be working together and having a different lens that could be, a student could have been harassed, like I said, during COVID, particularly since you guys are the AAPI cohort, students, going, oh, ha, 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 you gave me the virus because you're, part of Asian descent. They may have just not looked at it and said, oh, that kid was targeting, another kid because of their race, their ethnicity. So it's just a lot more education that needs to be done. And this is not something that is just MCPS. This is something we are seeing nationwide. So I do want to acknowledge that this is something schools are struggling with across the country. And that's where this program, and it has really been revamped over the years, and you're looking at a whole climate within the school system. And that's No Place for Hate is an incremental thing that can be working school by school. So. And
there was, you just touched on two things that I think we had thought about recommending. One was—
Sorry, my dog just started barking.
That's all right. I can't hear him.
But when Nazneen and I were talking, we were worried about that consistency, that some schools might address it as hate versus bullying. Yeah. Is there another body that reviews bullying incidents for hate bias by chance? That's the first question. And to the second point about the need for training, I know schools are, teachers are required every year to take a child neglect and abuse training. And now they it's by heart. And I was kind of interested in how do we get to a similar training in that way that it's required every year and they know it by heart and they know how to recognize bias. So those were two things that stuck out to me. I wondered if you had anything going on those two fronts.
So, from AD, I can give you from ADL's perspective. So, we're a leading anti-hate organization. We do a lot of anti-bias training. And I just think more needs to be done. And we have certainly, encouraged and tried to push Dr. McKnight and her team, that they need to include this more as part of their training for faculty and staff. I know they are definitely incrementally doing it. I don't know that they're, doing it as fast as we all would like. And I think you were at the Hate Bias Forum too, when she was talking about some of this. So I think this body, the task force, I know the Jewish cohort, I can speak on behalf, we feel very strongly this needs to be pushed also with the school system. I just think it needs to be like a requirement, and the Board of Education needs to be looking at this, and it needs to be part of the annual training that they do. And I can tell you some of the faculty that goes through it, it is not that great right now. They're saying they need more. They are asking for more so that they can do better to address this. So I just think we have to keep pushing the envelope with this for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nazneen?
So I just had a question with regard to whether or not there's been pushback from parents or anybody about the schools that do have the curriculum. Are they do they support it, or are there parents that just say, no, I don't want this. I don't want my kids to be part of this, my children to be part of this. And how is that being dealt with by the school, if you know?
So, I mean, it's voluntary. No, students don't have to participate in the committee that is formed, but that doesn't mean the school themselves won't be a no place for hate school. And yes, there are always parents. I can't speak to specifics, but yes, I think there are always people who are pushing back on something like this. I think it varies from school to school. I think that's where you need the leadership to say, well, your child may not have to participate, but we as a school, this is the tone we are setting. We are saying we are no place for hate. We are going to participate in some of these activities, and we are encouraging people to be a part of it. I don't think it's a requirement that I don't think they can require every student to participate in all of the activities, but there are certainly ones that they are pushing. So I think it's a little bit like asking your kid to be on some other after school activity as well. But I think it's more when the school themselves say it, they are providing the resources, and parents can choose what they want to do. I will say at the middle and high school level, it's mostly led by the kids. It really is. And these are kids who are asking for this and are saying, we want to learn more, we want to participate together. And that to me, really helps, push it along.
I had a follow-up,
Yeah,
Meredith.
sure.
So when the students form the committee, then do they contain those conversations within the committee, or do they go outside of the committee and undertake a school-wide sort of initiative?
So it varies a little bit from school to school, because like I said, a lot of this is student led. So when we work with the school and kind of provide them guidelines, and a lot of that is on that website. And so they're supposed to, assemble a team that is with, that is diverse. They are looking to, I'm just looking at some of the information. So sometimes they would do it through student groups. Sometimes they would do it through PTA. If there's an active PTA, and we've definitely seen that at the elementary school level, which I think also, works very well, because then you have the parent, teacher, and student involvement. It really is, they set the agenda and the consistency, but there are things that we ask them to do throughout the school year to get essentially the designation to be no place for hate. And so, I think it really does vary, and there we can, I'm just trying to think if there's any, good examples. Like there are activities that they will do. They could do a book club. They could do like artwork, which we've seen in the elementary school. There are a variety of different ways to handle it. It is really flexible, is what I would say. Yeah.
Right. And so with the increased interest by the schools, how much are you reliant on community volunteers? Parents?
Yeah, I think it depends. So like, I know like there are a couple of middle schools I know that are, last year that started it, and some of the equity staff within the school was leading it. And so they were kind of figuring out what the right cadence was. So it's hard to give like a larger, because I think some of it is very individualized, and there are some that are just more active than others. And some, like, I think it's like, say there's 6 activities, some meet the minimum and some do way more than that. And I think it really just, it does vary. Yeah.
Yeah, I might be thinking about your other educational program where you engage parent volunteers to teach them.
So, I mean, there are aspects of this for teachers to do different lesson plans and discussion guides. That is part of this. So, I would definitely take a look at the website, kind of dive into that a little bit more, because that kind of lays out a little bit more details than I would be able to go through.
Right.
Here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you. May,
course.
you had another question?
Yes, I was wondering if you had any experience with the app that Dr. McKnight mentioned, also the MCPS Stronger Student app that she was saying, was developed by students and could be used to report incidents. Like, do you know if it's being used or any data from that at all?
To my knowledge, no. I mean, I have one kid who graduated in June from MCPS. I have another who's a 10th grader. I don't think either of them knew anything about it. I mean, I just don't think it's I don't think it's widely known yet that it even really exists. I think, you know, the challenge, you know, and I don't place blame on anybody. I just think the challenge is that, you know, the word is not out as much as it should be. And there are so many mandatory requirements for faculty that they don't even know, you know, to tell their kids. And I will tell you, I've had to personally, you know, fill out for one of my kids, you know, the bullying and harassment form. And I knew what to look for, but I'm in the know. And
Right.
other people I've had to tell. So I just think from a PR standpoint, you know, when it comes to dealing with hate and bias, there are things that I think they can be doing, and I think they are getting there. I just don't think it's as fast as some of us would probably like. But honestly, I knew about the app, but I don't think a lot of people do. I mean, I remember when you asked that last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was at the Bias Forum, and I had people sitting around me going, "There's an app? I didn't know there was an app." So
It
yeah,
is
I think
new.
that
I
is
agree.
telling.
They get a lot of information at the beginning of the year. But I also know, like, school's been in session just a few weeks. I've already gotten 2 emails on hate bias incidents in my daughter's school. And I feel like they have missed opportunities to communicate some of these resources, like the app that students, like, not only are we a no place for hate school, but if you experience it, here is this app and form that you could use.
There have been, it's either 8 or 10, between 8 and 10 anti-Semitic incidents in the first 3 weeks of school. On the first, I think it was the first or second day of school. And, you know, the principals did a great job, and they provided, you know, communication to the community, which has not always been the case. And they provided resources. None of them had anything about the app in their letters. None of them.
And I also asked my daughter if the teachers spoke with her to explain what this incident was. And she said, no, it was just the students talking to each other. And here's the rumor mill.
And that's like a missed opportunity right there. So I do think, and I can speak for the Jewish cohort too, and not just on behalf of ADL, like, I do think that it should be a strong recommendation, some of these things that we've been talking about, that, you know, and some of it, look, the county council can't do it, or the county executive through legislation, but I think that there should be recommendations for the school board to be considering and making sure that the superintendent and her team are rolling out as well. And I think that some of the things you all have been talking about are really, really important.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So to summarize it, because we're trying to formulate the recommendations, it
Yeah.
sounds like there are opportunities to press for the school board to ensure that the superintendent is making those trainings available, communicating the available resources, and also opportunities for the community at large to participate through the PTA to support these student-led committees.
Yeah.
Okay.
And look, and I would just say that I think that, you know, we're coming to this from a lens of reactive, and we need to flip the narrative. We're always going to be reactive. You're never not going to be, but we need to flip the narrative and being more proactive. And we're not going to stop all of these incidents. We hope to suppress it a little bit, but it's also by being more proactive and getting a school to sign on to something like No Place for Hate, let's just say as an example, who never had an incident, then let's say they do, they can respond better. They know, they have the tools, they have the training, whatever the program is. And I think that is something, you know, we need to create access for this. And that is something that, you know, nationwide, we are playing a lot of catch up with. And Montgomery County, we are an incredibly diverse community. And also No Place for Hate is a program that allows you to learn about other communities, other ethnicities, other races, other religions. Like, it provides such an incredible opportunity, you know, and getting people out of their own little bubble is what I would say.
Thank you. We're right out of time, but Juan, do you have a quick question?
Yeah, I was just curious in terms of the number of schools in Montgomery County, you know, the ones you mentioned about 25. Are they,
as of today? Yeah, as of this
Yeah.
morning, have signed up for this school year.
yeah, are they typically in a certain cluster, or?
Nope, it's widespread. Yeah, it's throughout the whole community. We have a few that have signed up who had incidents last year who had never done it, but it is throughout throughout the whole county. So it's not any one particular cluster. I will say there are some clusters that continue to do it, and there are ones like maybe an elementary school within the cluster, and then they encouraged, you know, the next year others to sign up. But I don't have the full list in front of me, but I do know from previous years it has been throughout the county, which is nice also, like, so we're
Yeah.
not just seeing it in one particular area. There are others I really would like to do it that have not done it yet, so we could certainly talk about that offline.
Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing a very robust, longstanding program, far ahead of the curve, and we appreciate all the work that you've done and your time tonight also sharing that program with
Of
us.
course, you know, I'm always happy to. It's great to see you all, and good luck.
Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you.
Thanks, Meredith.
Bye, take care.
Take care. Okay. So now moving on with our agenda, I think Jeff has offered to give the readout from government relations to the next meeting. And Nazneen, did you have anything to? No. Okay, so we can move on. In that case, let's move on to the Jam board. And May, if you could draw that up.
Also, I still don't have access to the chat for whatever reason. It still says chat disabled for me.
Oh, okay. Selena, could you give Juan that access?
Does that work now?
Okay.
That still doesn't work?
Okay.
Well, I don't know why then.
Feel free to verbalize one. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem.
And so, May, if you could page to the end of the slides, there's some draft language for the policy recommendations. So I sort of took a first cut. Oop, we need to page back, maybe, yeah, to page 1. There we go. Okay. So we have 5 recommendations, and 1 is related to youth in schools. 3 relate to the AAPI community, and then the last one has to do with cross-community /solidarity. So as a recap, and we can finesse this, but number 1 had to do with asking the County Council Committee on Education and Culture, which is from where the S.E. McGuire came, to oversee MCPS efforts to address bullying, harassment, and bias, and to hold MCPS accountable to stakeholder interests. And then I name a couple of the specific interests that you all articulated, which was consistent responses by schools. And I added culturally competent communications with immigrant parents, because that's arisen in a couple of major events where it could have sidestepped some conflict with the school district. Did this capture the conversations, our past conversations, or does this need to be finessed? And we can finesse it in between this meeting and next, but I think the main thing is, did we capture the main essence of the recommendation that you all made?
I feel like I want to sit with it a little bit and kind of look through all of my notes, and I thank you for capturing this, Ariane, but I would love to like sit with it and tweak it and what have you.
I agree with May. I need a little time to look at it and sort of go through what I the notes that we have as well.
Absolutely. I know this is the first time that you're seeing this, so maybe some of the I think we have 2 weeks before the next meeting, and there's some email exchanges that we might be able to have to finesse this. Let me just present then some of the other recommendations, and then we can kind of go back and discuss them one by one, if that's okay. Okay. So the second one had to do with, if you recall, communication, education, public awareness raising. So I tried to break that down. So this point, number 2, has to do with public awareness raising. And it's about bias. What is it? We had a point about the law, so I put survivor rights in there, and then resources, this government and nonprofit resources to use communication strategies that are community specific. And the outcome that we're seeking is to counteract that fear and isolation that ensues after, a hate event, and then to empower those impacted communities. And so the subsets are to launch a public relations campaign to help residents recognize what bias is, know where to report, and how to access the government nonprofit programs and services. In terms of public relations campaigns, there are models. One exists in Los Angeles, the other in New York. And so they would plaster these PSAs across buses and place them in bus stops and also in train stations. So there are models there to look at. Secondly, in terms of creating the PSAs, I just sort of enumerate those same locations. Government buildings is another site, for example, so that it gets public exposure. C is about translating them into the languages that are spoken by communities with high rates of limited English proficiencies. They can even be tailored using census data as to placement of those PSAs or the messages. D relates to a reporting hotline. And I think the key thing there is that when someone is answering the phone, that if there's a limited English proficient caller, that they would be able to navigate that system or reach someone who would be able to direct them quickly to someone who could communicate with them. And then E has to do with ethnic media and just using print, TV, radio that's specific to those communities and in their languages, as well as social media platforms. We know that immigrant communities often go to those types of forms of information as opposed to mainstream ones. I think, Juan, you reported that out as part of your findings when you talked about social media. I didn't know if that was ethnic specific or not. But we know just from past experiences that immigrants primarily get their news from that kind of ethnic media. And then the last is to collect resident feedback on their understanding of, what options do they have in terms of what to do if they encounter bias. So some of it I kind of filled in nuances, but in terms of that communication, education, public awareness raising, does this capture the essence? Is there something missing, or is this sort of miss the mark in terms of our prior discussions?
I think overall it sounds great, and this is why I wanted to sit with the youth one, because I wanted to get to this level of detail. So thank you for pulling this together. One thing that I feel might be missing, but I don't know if it fits here, maybe somewhere else, like a 2B, or is, I think, to Meredith's point, this is kind of like, I don't know, it's preventative in a way, but it's all focused on the reporting side. And I feel like we also need PSAs that celebrate. This doesn't feel like celebrating the diversity of Montgomery County and the positives of each culture. And I feel like we need to also, yes, we need to call attention to our communities that they need to report hate, but I think we also need to do some work to build up the visibility of our respective communities and the joy that we have and the what we contribute, so that we don't feel invisible, right? Like I feel like, to the point of the Sikh community, right? Like we feel invisible. And I think that's often what many of the communities might feel if they're not in the majority minority, I guess. And so they just aren't feeling seen. So I think it would be lovely to find some way to get more communities feeling seen, and not just in the we're victims sort of way, but in a way of like, look at these wonderful things of our cultures and communities and the ways we contribute.
Point well taken.
I
Thank
would
you.
also say that, you know, when I'm looking at these, and again, I'm not sure how to phrase it, but I think that, and maybe it is understanding, making a recommendation, understanding that the Asian Pacific Islander community is comprised of a number of different ethnicities, both, you know, and religions, and that, you know, part of anti-hate is recognizing those different ethnicities and those different religious groups and how they are impacted differently and similarly with hate bias crimes or hate bias incidents. Because I think, you know, one of the things that we're looking at is, okay, if, you know, as the AAPI cohort, how does this, you know, how are we different, or how are what we're looking at different from the other cohorts, or what is it that is specific to our group? And I think that that's one of them, is that, you know, we're looking at Asia is a huge, you know, it's a huge swath of nations. And so when we're looking at it, you know, there are certain things that we all experience similarly, but there's also things that we experience differently. And I think that that has to be something that we recognize in the recommendations that we make.
Thank you, Nazneen. If I were to translate that into a recommendation, might that be to share impact stories?
It could be, yes. But I think that it's also, you know, like when May was talking about celebrating, you know, we're celebrating, you know, there are different ways and different things that we celebrate. And I think that recognizing that the Asian community has, you know, within it, you know,
49 countries and
Yeah.
2,300 languages. We're not a monolith, right? Like, I think people
Right.
want to be seen that there's a lot of diversity even
within
this minority,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
And
I
I
think that's
dropped a
what you're
link in
saying.
the chat and shared in the email just before our meeting. I'm sorry, I thought I sent this last night, but I had promised last time that I would get started on a draft outline on the presentations that's kind of went over, like, here is the history, examples of unique challenges to the AAPI experience of hate. And so I started some of these bullet points there, and welcome feedback on that. So I'll put it in the notes. I'll reshare it when we do the readout for this meeting.
And maybe part of that is also recognizing that a lot of individuals within the AAPI community don't report, and why they don't report, and
Yep.
you know, the negative stereotypes, or even the cultural but you know, culturally why you know a lot within the AAPI community decide not to move forward with something. And I think, sorry, one more thing. And I think maybe that, you know, given that historical context, and that's current today, even that might be more of when we're giving the recommendations, it may give more of a reason of why we're making these recommendations and how they play into the AAPI communities.
Okay, very helpful feedback. I know we're going to be going over this again, you know, a second, third pass. So this is not the only time. Just in the interest of time, let me quickly go over the other points. Number 3 and 4 also relate to the AAPI community, and we had talked about inclusion, and we talked about representation. So number 3 tries to capture those ideas in this recommendation, which is to improve DEI of Asian Americans in county decision-making and leadership, to empower the diverse ethnic groups to have a voice, and then tying it to our work is on anti-bias efforts. And the way to do that is, in y'all's words, to be seen, to be heard. So how do we do that? It's first of all making sure that the data is collected on Asian Americans, and that they're done so on a disaggregated basis, so that we can also see who's their representation in the county government, especially at those decision-making levels, because we know that that is also what steers the policy and the spotlight on Asian American community and issues. And also on the community side, how much are residents using the county programs and services, because that also speaks to any gaps such as outreach or language support or cultural competency and providing those services. And then B deals with, using that racial equity lens to really evaluate, to interrogate why the usage rates might be very low. And then C has to do with trainings. We talked about trainings on Asian Americans and just ensuring that across the board, the government, that those trainings are carried out on Asian Americans. And then D is to benchmark the progress in terms of recruitment, mentorship, employee affinity groups, and leadership opportunities for Asian American employees. And this is just recognizing that inside the government, that those inside champions are the ones that, do drive the policy. Number 4 really has to do with those outside champions and building the capacity of the API community serving organizations. So I talk about here funding those organizations so that they have the capacity to do the civic work and advocacy. B, once they are at a level where they are strong, then the government can partner with them to do the outreach. C is possibly also to fund navigators to help survivors navigate through the social services, victims advocacy, victims funds, what have you. And then D is really about fostering the growth of those organizations to ensure that all the different ethnic groups are represented and by the organizations that they trust, which might be their local community center, faith organization, and that the growth of all those organizations can lead to a coordination or a coalition that can put forth a Pan-Asian American voice. So that's 3 and 4. Or anything that stands out to you immediately about these 2 recommendations? So if you need more time, that's okay. And, we can go over that a bit more. And why don't I just introduce the last one, and then we'll convene and give you some time to kind of sit on it. This is less developed, but I think where this is sort of headed is toward a similar recommendation that the Jewish American Cohort made, which is basically to support the work of the anti-hate task force to continue on even past the charge, which ends the end of November. And, there are a couple of different ideas of the work that they could do. Now, we haven't discussed this. And so this is just, everything is still wide open to discussion and also cross-referencing the meetings that we've had, the meetings that we've tuned into, and our notes. So please feel free to pitch something in lieu of this. But it was just sort of a thought-provoking kind of language to get you started. Okay. So let me recommend that I open up an email thread so we can kind of talk about these ideas. And just to kind of wrap up for the evening in terms of next steps, May, could you tell us when our next meeting is? I think it's October 16th, Monday at 8 p.m. Is that right?
That's what I was just going to confirm. Does that work for everyone? I didn't see the last email thread, if that worked for everyone. Yeah, okay, 10:16 at 8 p.m. Thank you guys for your flexibility.
Thank you. And are you all comfortable with, email conversations, or do you feel like you need, an hour and a half for that meeting to go through the recommendations? Because by that point, I think we're refining the language and talking about the form of our presentation. And then we have one last meeting after that to finalize everything.
Yeah, I feel like either email or like in comments or track changes on the document, well, like what's helpful to get to that synthesizer, like if we're all sharing thoughts on an email, is, Ariane, are you synthesizing? Are we synthesizing together at the next meeting? Like what's most conducive to that?
Yeah, or is it a Google Doc where we can all make comments and everything? I would say if it's a Google Doc, maybe comments are better than making changes in the document itself. Just because then there's too many hands in it and people are going back and forth.
Yes, I can do that. So let me put this in a Google Doc, and then invite you to make comments. And I might also just throw out, these questions to begin conversations around them and take them sort of like one recommendation at a time. Okay, good. So thank you so much. I hope today was informative. I know that we started to get the juices going with the conversation, so I hope to continue that. I want to thank you again for your time and comments.
One more
And
question though for our
Yes.
action steps, because you're going to share the Google Doc, the cohort will review. I shared a link to the draft of the presentation. Do you want to save that for after our next meeting?
Yes, so we can also talk about that concurrently over the next 2 weeks as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have questions about whether it's a PowerPoint, whether that's a report.
Yeah, I was thinking PowerPoint, but before I tried to make it pretty, I was focusing on the content because I was trying to do both at the same time. And I'm like, they don't need to see the background right now or photo. So was just kind of stressing like, what is the key message headline? Like if they read only the headline from each page, what would they get? And the rest is just kind of providing examples in color. So that's the way I approached it. And I did that beginning portion, not the recommendation portion, because we didn't have that, but that kind of like following the example that the Jewish cohort did of like, what's the context? What's this look like? What are examples? I was looking forward to hearing more from your conversation with Ishan about maybe some of the examples he had, and wanting to include some examples, maybe from the Sikh community, Juan, if there's something from the surveys that's helpful. I do want to make sure, we can try to be more representative in what we in our share out so that everyone feels a little bit more seen and heard. So definitely welcome those type of feedback too. Like, let's take out some of these bullets, because I know a lot of the ones that I just Googled really quick ended up being like the Chinese Exclusion Act or the Chinese Massacre. So right, like we don't need a bunch from one community. Like I want to make sure when we sprinkle in a lot from different communities.
I will say that I know the Sikh community was really targeted, especially after 9/11, because they were looked at as Arabs, and it was just it was for the Arab community, and they're not, and it's very different. But again, because of the turbans, because of the way that they they look, that's what people saw. And again, unfortunately, we that's itself a bias, because that's not what Arabs look like. But that a lot of Indians got targeted, whether they were Muslim or not.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, and the Sikh American organizations have really come out in the lead in terms of responses to hate crimes because of the post 9/11 profiling and the hate crimes. So glad that we were able to capture some of those thoughts. Another thing that I'll do is there's some summaries of meetings, including with Ishan and others, and we'll circulate that. So that'll be another follow-up item. May, if you could put that down. And do you have everything you need to report out to Selena?
So let me just make sure I have all the action steps that are captured. I have, again, Ariane, you'll show the Google Doc with the draft recommendations. The cohort is to review recommendations, share thoughts via comments instead of track the changes, because we'll get confused there. I will share the link to the draft of the presentation so that people can provide feedback on that. And then the last one, I think you said was Ishan.
Yeah, summaries with other people that we've met. And so that's the follow-up. But in terms of like the basic meeting information that
Yep,
we wanna
I
convey-
have the notes. I have the start time, the call to order at 7:02. And then when
Excellent.
we close, I'll capture that as well.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you all for staying over a bit, and you, Selena, as well. So with that, good
Oh,
night.
sorry, Ariane, I just wanted
Go
to
ahead.
ask you if you have everything you need for the group get together, for the cohort, for the task force get together.
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, I may not be able to make it, but I'm hoping I can. But I wanted to make sure that if you needed anything beforehand, or if you need us to do anything, you can let us know.
Yes, yes. So I think if you could let me know as soon as possible, Nazneen, if you can make it. And then that would be really helpful, because there are different roles
Mhm.
that everyone could take, and I'll try to recruit some more volunteer help.
If not, I can try to bring some dessert and drop it off at your place, if that's okay.
Great, awesome.
Hey, Ariane, that's on November 19th. At what time?
2 to 4.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, and then Selena, I'm sorry, last thing, since we're talking about a social mixer, so the AAPI cohort and Mokopan wants to host a social mixer for the anti-hate task force, and all the county staff and officials who have been involved in this process as well. So the council president is available on Sunday, November 19th.
Mhm.
And I'll host it at my residence. So it's 2 to 4. And so we have a flyer ready, and I could send it out, but I'd probably use the most recent email that I can find that has everyone's emails. Or should I share that with you?
You
'Cause you
can
might
send it to
have-
me.
Okay,
Because
all right.
I actually think some of those have changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay. So that will go out. And then I'll talk to you all further about roles. I think I've been texting everyone about what they might be able to do. Okay, thanks for asking, Nazneen. All right, so are we all good? So I'll see you over over email next. Thank you all so much, and good night.